Welcome to episode number 306 of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Halo's big news, Nintendo's alarm clock, a new Game of the Year contender, and much more. Before we get started, subscribe to the Baunfire Gaming Podcast on your favorite podcast app and leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, or subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members or Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, check out the links in the show description. If you have your own topics, questions, or feedback, please be sure to let me know in my Discord, in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on social media at Bon Diesel or at the Baunfire. Let's get into some gaming news. Let's kick it off with Xbox. 343i rebrands as Halo Studios. A video came out this week that was kind of reintroducing the studio and talking about their plans and even showing off a little bit of footage of what they're currently working on. It was really interesting. So it seems like they're dropping the Slip Space engine. That's the most recent iteration of what I believe has always been a proprietary engine for Halo. If you remember in the days and weeks and months after Infinite came out, there was a lot of conversation about how basically that engine allowed them to do some things that they had wanted to do before, but it had a lot of issues and caused them to basically not do everything they wanted to do, and that it was just limited in a lot of ways. And it, in the long term, came out that a lot of the limited amounts of content that came out, whether it was with the single player or multiplayer, was very much due to some issues that they had with that engine. So as part of this announcement, they talked about how they are now moving to Unreal Engine, specifically Unreal Engine 5. And a bunch of this video, which you can check out, I believe, on the Halo YouTube. It's probably on the Xbox One as well, or you can find it in some various places on social media. They showed a bunch of footage. Now, supposedly, this footage is from this Foundry project. Foundry being the pretty famous part of Halo, being as part of the game where all the Halo rings are made. Of the game lore, of the actual physical game. It's always been a really popular thing that you could like make your own content basically in Halo. This is supposedly one of multiple projects they're currently working on. And I saw some commentary being like, well, this doesn't really look that, amazing. Well, it's probably pre-alpha footage. This is probably, these models of Master Chief and then Elite and some environmental stuff, very likely not game ready. I imagine this is all pretty early stuff just so they could show something. Maybe the most important thing that they talked about or showed, or that's been talked about since this video came out and this big announcement happened, is that they are staffing up in a more permanent way. So, Halo Infinite and even 4 and in the previous games, 4 and 5, I believe, had this issue where 343 wasn't really that big of a studio, and they heavily relied on like temporary contract developers. So it's a fairly common practice, I believe, but I believe Xbox and especially for 343 was it was pretty common for them to do, I think it's 6-month contracts. And then they have to let the people go. And then they had like a stipulation where you couldn't be rehired for another 6 months or a year or something. So there was this issue where they would have people working on their games who would, know how to work on their games, especially in the proprietary engine. But they could only be there for 6 months and then they couldn't come back for a while, right? It's not a great way, especially with a proprietary engine, to do anything really. I believe this was the tactic that a lot of companies have used to do this stuff, where they don't have to pay these people their insurance benefits and retirement and all that. So hopefully, supposedly, they're getting away from that practice, and I can only imagine that's a good thing for the Halo brand. How I feel about this, I love Halo. I've played it since the first one, and I think I've played every one since. There's a chance I didn't play 4. I know I played 5. Can't remember if I played 4 or not, but I liked Infinite. I really liked the single player, even though I didn't love the open world part of it. It just, I like the more straightforward, thing that you get from, the kind of more classic games. And even the multiplayer, once it got some content, I really enjoyed a lot. But I dropped off, just like I'm sure many did, even though I'm under the impression the game's actually in really good shape at this point, and even community wise, it's doing pretty well. But it it needed a reboot, like this reboot, the rebranding of the studio, kind of having this new focus, using a new engine. Those are probably good things for the brand. I don't know how hyped anyone was going to be for Halo Infinite 2, right? It sounds like that was in development at one point on the Slipspace engine, and that's been canceled. That is no longer happening. And now there's kind of this mystery about what's going to come in the future. During this video, some people spotted that there appears to be something coming for the Master Chief Collection this year for one of their anniversaries. But a lot of the speculation now is basically around like, what are they gonna do for the next game? There's some rumor that their first big project is going to be remaking completely the first Halo game, and that then there's some rumor that people think they may go from there and just kind of reboot the series entirely. There's some rumor that they think they may kind of go from 3 and kind of reboot their own games, since 4 and 5 and Infinite haven't been the most popular in the series, and that maybe they'll do that. Of course, because it's Xbox, the rumor is the reason that they're switching to Unreal Engine 5 is that so it can be a multi-platform game. Because apparently everyone's just so positive that Xbox is going full multi-platform. That's been a really weird kind of persistent rumor that gets brought up all the time, and there's really, in my opinion, no reason to actually think that at this point. But because that's a very clickable thing to speculate. I mean, this I believe this was even put out there by Digital Foundry, who is Digital Foundry is very interesting because they're obviously very well respected for their like technical breakdowns and their knowledge on video games. But sometimes I think, that like their actual knowledge of how the industry is going or where things are going, or just their kind of opinions on like their like subjective opinions on games, I think are often pretty basic. But their technical knowledge and their prowess there kind of, sometimes people think that, well, they know how games work really well, so they must know, their opinions on video games or on, what companies are doing must be really good too. And I have found that they tend not to be. They don't really seem to be people who are getting like insider hints or tips, and they very much have a very pedestrian take when it comes to like, their reviews of games and even where the industry is going, while their technical knowledge on games and engines and all that is probably the best of any, at least, social media influencers or whatever you consider them. So I don't believe that they're putting Halo on Unreal Engine 5 to put it on PlayStation. I think they're doing it because their proprietary engine was one of the biggest reasons their previous game failed, and their previous games have struggled. There's so many reasons to switch to Unreal Engine 5 before assuming full multi-platform for what, I still think is Xbox's premier brand, even if it may not sell that way or necessarily have that reputation at the moment. while maybe Xbox is going to go more multi-platform than it has before, I don't think it ever will fully go. And I would have to imagine Halo would be the very last game you would ever see on a PlayStation. The only exception being maybe multiplayer. Like, you know, we've really found and Xbox has had success with like Sea of Thieves and Grounded, and you know, these multiplayer experiences. There's so little argument for keeping multiplayer experiences exclusive platform wise. It makes no sense, really. At the end of the day, it makes no sense to do that. And to do that at this point, in my opinion, is to just deny money to your company. So when we've seen the rumors about like Helldivers 2 coming to Xbox eventually and stuff, and you know, maybe it will, maybe it won't. It probably won't. But it probably should, you know, for PlayStation's sake. And, you know, that's a whole different discussion. But I don't think these things are happening so that Microsoft can put what I would argue is still their premier franchise on their competitive platform. I could be wrong. Maybe that's going to happen and I'll look real stupid one day. But overall, I'm really excited about this. You know, Halo needed a reboot. The idea of getting to play the Halo 1, remade really on Unreal Engine 5 is super cool. I can't, that'd be really, really, really awesome. I would actually be more excited about that than them even putting out a new game right now. That would be such a good way for them to kind of reground the franchise, to give people kind of a refreshed look on it, to give younger, newer players and people in the game community a chance to be reintroduced to the brand. Because there's probably a lot of current gamers who, weren't even alive when that game came out, who would, it'd be a good introduction to the game. And I would love to see that. So we'll have to wait and see. Android users in the US will soon be able to buy games directly through the Xbox app after a big legal ruling against Google. Basically, Google now has to allow, due to a competitive issue, has to allow competing stores on their phones and has to allow access to the entire library, the app library of the Google Play Store, onto any other store that wants to be on their platform. A big part of that is that it no longer allows Google to restrict purchasing on their devices to their own app. They've made arguments in the past that they did that for security reasons and all of that, and that may be legit. But they also did it so that they could charge a fee on top of any sales made through their platform. So, for instance, with things like Twitch, if you purchase something on Twitch, like a subscription or bits, you'll notice that it's more expensive to do it on there, even through the Twitch app, than it is to just do it on your desktop. And that's because even if you're paying through the Twitch app, it's still using the Google Play Store to do that purchase. And Google is taking a cut. Therefore, Twitch charges more when you purchase on Android to cover that cut that Google is going to take. So now what's going to happen is, in theory, that shouldn't happen anymore. When you purchase, say, bits on Twitch or a subscription, assuming they take over their own payment system, you will just pay the same as you would on a desktop. That's going to be really cool. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I'll be curious to how this changes anything, how this changes Xbox's behavior on mobile and things like that, with things like the cloud or even natively played games on mobile. It seems like an area they're wanting to get into, and a big part of their acquisition of Activision Blizzard was also King, the K and ABK, and it should be expected that they're going to try to leverage that mobile brand and that mobile prowess they now have from that company and from others. Then there was a rumor that came out from that Xbox is ending sales in Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Middle East region. This was reported on by a Saudi Arabian gaming media outlet. It was then most basically pushed back on by Jez Corden in a statement from Microsoft saying that they had no plans to stop selling their hardware in this region. People did note that basically the rumor was that they were going to let hardware sell through and not restock basically in that area. The Microsoft statement on it didn't directly, I guess, say no to that. But at the end of the day, this just seems like another one of those stories of, unsubstantiated rumor gets put out by, arguably not very reputable source. And then a bunch of media outlets that are supposedly reputable run with it because it seems like any stories that paint Xbox in a bad light do really, really well. They get the conversation going, and maybe a good or a bad choice, I don't really know. Xbox seems so reluctant. They can't necessarily respond to every one of these rumors because they would only spend time responding to rumors and never actually releasing information. And, you don't want your brand to appear like it's always on the defensive. So it's just one of those tough things where, like, it has to be frustrating that, rumors about multi-platform, rumors about, hardware, rumors about, now this must be really frustrating because they have a plan and they probably often feel like they can't implement that plan. And it's really interesting to me how often you see people being like, well, Xbox isn't messaging well. Xbox isn't, they're in chaos. They're, all of these accusations about the status of Xbox. While really they've said or done nothing wrong, people are just taking rumors that are substantiated or not and believing them and then applying that, it's interesting. So, unfortunately, I think it's one of those things where no matter what they say or do, it's not going to change anything. So more than likely Xbox is just going to try to stay on brand, stay on message. You just don't see Nintendo or PlayStation getting the same commentary, even though they like barely speak at all. And if that's what people want from Xbox, I guess that's cool. I kind of like that Xbox is a little more interactive and fun, or however you'd want to paint it. But it seems like even though it should be a good thing, it kind of gets put out there as a bad thing. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it seems like this rumor, likely isn't true or is only a half truth. So we'll have to wait and see. For PlayStation, we didn't have any big news from what I could tell, but we did have a couple, at least temporarily exclusive games come out on the platform. Silent Hill 2 came out and got an 86 Metacritic score. Pretty good. I don't think anyone really expected that. It seems like it has some issues, and I've seen people point that out, but it's a very, very faithful remake. Bloober Team doesn't have the best reputation, and there's a lot of concern they wouldn't be able to handle this project, and it seems like they did it really well. They even added content or brought the game to a more modern standard in a lot of ways, and it seems like it was almost universally seen as successful. I think they even added some new endings to the game, and overall I've seen nothing but praise about this. There's obviously the turds out there who are saying that one of the characters looks too manly or whatever. You just have to ignore these people. They're finding reasons to crap on anything, and it's mostly just because they're bored or sad or whatever. But 86 Metacritic score, I don't think anyone really expected that, and I think that's really, really good. Until Dawn also got a remake, and this was maybe a little less praised, but it's mostly because apparently it's just not running very well for anyone or anything. It has a Metacritic score of 71. It seems like the actual remake itself is pretty good. That it looks really good. Even the visuals I've seen from it, like I've seen some people playing it, and it looks like a modern game, and it's definitely still that. The old game, they did make it a little more modern. I believe the way you traverse the world and stuff like that is a little more traditional, like third person game, rather than being completely in that kind of old Resident Evil style camera and all that. But it seems like it's the issues with this is it's very much an issue with the technical side of the game that has really dragged down the score of this one. So they'll get it fixed up. Maybe that score comes up a bit, but we'll see. Nintendo, the big news for them this week, which, man, I can't wait until they actually have a new console to talk about. Their Alarmo. They have a Nintendo alarm clock that's coming out. And that was the big news. So I'm just going to leave that there. Moving on to other news, Metaphor ReFantazio released the most JRPG I think I've ever seen, and it has an open critic score of 92. Just to address it real quick, if a game was an exclusive, I do Metacritic, but if it's a multi-platform game, I do OpenCritic, because OpenCritic puts all of the scores into one, where Metacritic splits them up. Metaphor ReFantazio has probably entered the race as being one of the games that will almost certainly be nominated for Game of the Year this year, because its Metacritic score, I believe, is 94 and 95. I played there's a demo, and so the funny thing about it is apparently this demo is longer than a lot of full price games. So it's a free demo that I assume is a good chunk of the game, up to a certain point. And I tried to get into it. I've never gotten into JRPGs. I can't do all the reading, because technically, I mean, they have dubs, but I really can't stand it when games, and it's a very JRPG thing, and I know they're really big and they're really long and there's hundreds of thousands of lines, but when only like 10% of the lines in the game are voiced and the other ones are the character making a noise as you read text, can't do it. It's one of those pet peeves to me. It's also a turn-based game, turn-based combat. I got into that with Baldur's Gate. I couldn't really get into it with this. I'm not a JRPG guy, and that doesn't matter because this game's getting almost universal praise. So I wonder if that energy will keep up. These games just simply aren't as popular as they probably should be in the West when it comes voting time for Game of the Year, especially with a system like the Game Awards has. I'll be curious how this one goes, especially when there are a pretty good number of games that already seemed like locks for Game of the Year. It'll be interesting how this one fares, but for the people who are in, I believe this is made by the same people as Persona, and it's Persona in a different setting with different characters, and if that's your thing, it seems like this is extremely good. I've been watching Pirate, the various people playing this game, and I get it. Like, the production level's insane, the UI's crazy. The voice acting that's there is really good in the more major moments. Not my type of game, but tons of respect for it, and I'm curious to see how this plays out at the end of the year. Ubisoft acknowledges a possible deal with Tencent. So late last week, I don't think I covered it, but there were rumors that Tencent may be buying out the current owners of the Ubisoft corporation. Yves Guillemot, I believe is how you say his name. His family, it's his brothers, and he started Ubisoft. I believe he's the only one still involved, but his family still owns the brand and owns the company. I believe they own 51% and Tencent owns 49%, if I remember correctly. And there's basically a possible deal that could go down to turn the majority there and potentially even sell out all of their stock to Tencent. Yeah, not sure how I feel about it. We'll have to see what happens. If I was a dev there, I'd be a little concerned. I believe I did talk about this last week, and that's where I was at with it. But Ubisoft actually acknowledging the deal, where they were very vague about it. They're like, "Oh, we're always considering options." Blah blah blah. We'll see what happens. I suspect it's going to happen, and we'll see. For things actually going on inside Ubisoft, Insider Gaming reports that the Splinter Cell remake is still being worked on. There's a tentative date of 2026 for it, but that may not even happen. So we'll have to see. I'm curious to why that would have such a long dev cycle, but maybe it's a bigger project than people think. And that the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake may be due as soon as next year in 2025. And it could be part of up to 10 Assassin's Creed games released in the next 5 years. So they are going to be pumping out games on that license, I guess. They know where their money's coming from. Konami announces a licensing deal with FIFA. This is specifically for 2 esport World Cups. I assume these are for 2 games that will go along with the upcoming World Cups. This is a somewhat big deal because EA had that license with FIFA for many, many, many years and dropped it a couple years ago. That's why now EA's soccer game is no longer called FIFA. It's called EAFC. Still quite popular, still quite good for people who enjoy the sports games and that game specifically. But I believe it was something like for another 10-year license, FIFA wanted like $2 billion or something. While I suspect FIFA probably would probably pay for itself. That was obviously if EA is not willing to bite it, then no one really probably is. I can't imagine this deal with Konami is nearly as expensive because it doesn't seem like it's nearly as prolific. But it's still interesting. I suspect EAFC will continue to dominate the market pretty heavily, and that whatever Konami puts out will likely be much smaller in scale, and we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Alien Isolation is getting a sequel, so I believe it's been like 10 years since that game came out, and they announced it's getting a sequel. So I am not into those type of games. I am too much of a scaredy cat, so that is not going to happen for me. But I am happy for everyone who's been wanting that. Discord was banned in Turkey and Russia. This is kind of an interesting thing. Discord's a very gaming-based service, even though it's definitely spread out its wings quite a bit, especially during the COVID years. They definitely tried to push more into the business market to become kind of that communication hub, but they've kind of recommitted to being very much more focused on gaming and stuff like that in the last year or so. But this was interesting. So basically, the governments of Russia and Turkey were claiming that they wanted to be able to see chat logs and all that with complete access to investigate crimes, child abuse, things like that were supposedly happening on the platform in their countries. And Discord refused to do that. Now, one thing to consider, so apparently both Ukraine and Russia, and I'm sure all of these countries use Discord for like government stuff, including the military. It's a pretty well documented thing that both Ukraine and Russia are using Discord to even do like video calls and like scouting and stuff like that in their war that's happening in Ukraine. And while they're saying that they've done this ban because that they wanted to be able to investigate crimes, which maybe is partially true, there was also concern that Russia was potentially going to try to use this to like hack into Ukrainian military groups to see what they were doing and locate them and stuff like that. So this ban is interesting because apparently Russian forces are using it too, and this has like significantly impacted their ability to communicate because their own systems are a bit outdated and not super useful for the type of things they were using here. So a bit of interesting real life implications into a thing that at least people who probably listen to this show and kind of interact in this world maybe think of Discord as one thing. It's easy to forget that it's other things as well. As for content updates, I am currently working on getting some new some mounting arms for my monitors, on figuring out a better way to mount my camera, maybe even the mic, and probably a new lighting solution that I'm currently using 2 reading lamps that are adjustable LED lamps that have served me very well, but probably there's probably a better option that I can upgrade to. So if you have any suggestions on that stuff, please let me know in the various ways I've given people to contact me. A bit of a short show this week. There wasn't any huge developments or announcements, but we have a bunch of games coming out here in the next few weeks, especially Dragon Age of the Veilguard. And then right after that, we have BioWare's N7 Day, their little Mass Effect celebration. So things are going to pick up. Keep an eye out for other content I'm going to be making over on the YouTube channel. That includes a bunch of Mass Effect related stuff around both in 7-Day, the next game, and obviously I'll be talking a bit about Dragon Age: The Veilguard as that game comes out. I'm expecting that game to get review codes probably next week or in this coming week when you're listening to this. I put in for one. We'll see if I get it. I probably won't. But I hope I do. If I do, you won't hear me talking about it because I probably won't be able to. So you can decipher whether or not I'm getting a review or not early by how much I talk about it in the next couple weeks. But that's what I have for this one. So let's wrap this thing up. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.